Legacy week 4 was an exciting one. We got some of our offense back. Some quarterbacks decided they can throw, and some wide receivers decided they can catch. We even had a few tight ends actually do something, although not that many. And we definitely either had running backs who did nothing or went off, and you probably know who is what. So getting into our action, let's just touch quickly on a few stories from week 4 in the NFL. After week 4 in the NFL, we typically are faced with this kind of decision. Now, to put it in, I was going to say booty call because that's more my generation, but apparently I looked it up and it's situationship. So you can look up that definition, or in fact, I'll maybe just include it. But the idea that, is this something serious or is this something that we just want to walk away from? Now, in some cases in the NFL sense, Vegas has a hard time trying to set lines because we don't know, are these teams legit or not? We know there's only one 0-4 team left, and that's Jacksonville. If you have any piece of their offense, you're probably not super happy unless you did take their rookie wide receiver or you were excited to get their backup running back now that there's some kind of confusion in the backfield. Other than that, you're probably cut and baiting running, and that's not really even a question. Looking at our two undefeated teams, you've got Kansas City, who I'll talk about in a second, but Minnesota has kind of been the cash cow. You certainly look at someone like Sam Darnold. Are you going to keep rolling, and is he going to be the quarterback that you stole and get you to the playoffs? Or are you thinking maybe his time has come? He's done you well for a couple of weeks, but maybe now he's just going to run out of his luck. Now, Jefferson obviously doesn't qualify, and I wouldn't include their running game, but right now they're about as hot as it gets. So it really makes us have to think and put stock into who's great and who's not so much. We look back at our draft, this is almost split 50-50. And the running backs, most highly drafted running backs have been massive disappointments. Obviously McCaffrey with the injury, but we forget Hall and Bijan have not been the top 3, top 4, or highest auction picks that we were advertised. The only one you can argue, Jonathan Taylor, is probably pulling his weight. And on the receivers, it's pretty split. Hill, not his fault, but certainly not his excellence this year, is what you're buying into. Garrett Wilson, who I'll talk about more. You've got a few people that are on that cusp of doing all right. I mean, Jefferson's obviously been doing great. CeeDee Lamb, St. Brown, and Chase have been all right, and they were all circling around that first round. So you're not really going to make huge deals with them, although some you might be considering at this stage if you're getting tired of waiting for them to wake up. But those mid-tier receivers like the Waddles, Ayuks, tight ends like Kelsey and Andrews, what do they all have in common? They actually have less receiving touchdowns than Jared Goff. He caught one last week. You can look it up if you didn't see it. That's not great. So we really have to start thinking, which offenses do you want to buy into, which players do you want to buy into, and which ones do you want to cut and run? And I think two teams really showed this for me. Number one, if you remember about 4 or 5 weeks ago when the league was just getting started, the New York Jets were a darling amongst a lot of people to have this prolific offense. And obviously Hall and Wilson, I mentioned, have been huge disappointments. But even at the quarterbacking position, Aaron Rodgers, who I think if you watched was lovingly referred to by Nikki Glazer as Throwin' Rogan, he was supposed to bring new blood to this offense this year, which is ironic both because of his age and he likely doesn't believe in giving blood for some reason. But he hasn't done anything but argue with coaches and coordinators about snap count. And the offense really has been stagnant to the point that they actually lost to a Denver Broncos team who had Bo Nix throwing so little yards that it was the least amount a quarterback has thrown in a win in over 17 years, Eli Manning being the most recent to do such a feat. The other team that I think is worth mentioning and has been kind of deceiving for a little while now is the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I did mention in an actual football sense they're 4-0, but for fantasy, that doesn't get you many points. You look at Vegas over-unders and you look at Yahoo Predicteds, and they still think the Chiefs' offense is good. But I'm not so sure. To me, it's closer to like friends. Not them being friends. Apparently they are friends, which I guess is impressive in a world that also argues with each other. They have a quarterback whose wife follows one candidate and a tight end whose girlfriend follows the other and a kicker who just says outlandish stuff occasionally, and apparently they still get along. But I'm talking about the TV show Friends. Now, not to go on a massive tangent, and many of you know my bias towards TV shows. I did give them up for over a year and did not miss them at all because I felt that I just would like a character or a plot line, and then I'd watch several seasons only to realize I stopped liking the show several seasons ago. Friends kind of falls in that category for me. I was young, or I'm old enough, I should say, to remember when I was young. The first couple seasons came out. They tackled hard-ending issues. They had, an openly gay couple. They were considered progressive, which is funny by modern standards now. They did even have some more serious and comedic episodes that I thought were kind of clever at the time. But then they just got real bad. And I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of Friends people out there, but find someone who's never watched an episode, show them some random episodes from, season 7, 8, 9, 10. I would have a hard time thinking they'd think it was a good show. Plus, if you think of the actual history of New York around season 8, 9, something kind of big happened that they just forgot to mention. And I guess the Friends characters were so self-involved, maybe they noticed or didn't notice the towers going. But weird not to mention that in a show based on New York. But that kind of is the point, is they became characters of each other and they're not real characters at all, but just caricatures. I think the Chiefs arguably are around the same. When is the last time Mahomes actually had consecutive weeks where he broke his Yahoo predicted? And Travis Kelce just exceeded his Yahoo predicted for the first time this season, and he only did it a handful in previous seasons. So I don't know why we keep expecting them to explode with this new offense. In fact, they've scored 30 or more points only 3 times in the last 26 games. And yet, some part of us still thinks, hey, but maybe this week is the week. So I think it's really good for us to go through our lineups right now and try to play that game. Is this serious? Do we want to make a bigger commitment? Or is this a booty call and I should cut and run, try and trade, or just outright drop the player? Anyway, that's spoken from someone who's doing about 50-50 overall in all the leagues, so that could be a little bitterness as well. Speaking of said leagues, let's get to some scores. Boy, did Ken take offense to my not having won since marriage. He came out and had the high score of the week with 188. And if you look at how he did it, sure, he had an injury, and that's not great. I've got Richardson in other pools. That one stinks, and it definitely stinks when your player goes down in the first quarter. But you think that stopped him? Not at all. Fields was the quarterback 1 on the week. Obviously, Henry was the number back 1 by a fair bit. Reed was the wide receiver 2. Lamb was the wide receiver 3. So he had just outstanding performances almost across the board. And I know we can take a look and say, oh, his tight end only got 5. Look at what your tight end did. I bet you that except for like 5 or 6 of us, it wasn't over 5, and it certainly wasn't double digits. So relax a second. On the bench, he made most of the right calls here, and obviously he wasn't going to start his boy. So Connor, even though you didn't have that much of an underperformance, it was a slight underperformance. Now, you definitely had the wide receiver 1 in Nico, which was great. Your tight end is the Pitts, unfortunately. Kamara has been doing great, and Johnson's been a good addition since they got a quarterback that can throw the ball. But you were going to need to put much more here. Also, maybe change your name to Team Commando. You're currently dealing with an unfurnished basement here. You got a bunch of people on injury, and some of them are still injured. Some of them are on bye, so I would be shocked if this ends up being your team for too much longer. You make too many moves. You slip to 1-3. Kent also 1-3, so this is actually a key win for you. You did get the key win. You did jump yourself out of the basement, and congratulations, sir, on the huge output. Yes, I'm fully aware what your team used to be, so now I'm backpedaling fiercely, so you keep it this way. In another pretty epic matchup, we had Jeff suffer his first loss, or I should say Rennie handed him his first loss because he was only a couple points off our top spot in scoring. For Jeff, it wasn't a massive underperformance, but similar to what I said for Connor, it was a slight underperformance, and unfortunately, you needed to go off this week. You just didn't quite manage it. Now, you did have some good news in Neighbors being our wide receiver 4. For a young wide receiver at this stage, that's pretty fantastic, but you're getting slammed by Hall right now, and your quarterbacks definitely did not produce. Certainly not enough if you're going up against a 180. You did have a few bench points here, but like I said, you needed to make some drastic moves or some drastic hits to get it. Now, Rennie, the crazy part is sure, you definitely had some great performances. Goff was our quarterback 3. You had our top-rated defense. Kelce finally punched above his weight class, and he was our tight end 3. And oddly enough, you did make an odd decision. Well, I don't blame the decision. I thought Swift was going to have an awful week. He did not. He was our running back 3. But realistically, you just kind of had that pick away, 20 points, 15 points, 20 points, 20 points. So frustrating to play someone like that, just because every time you see someone start, they just start giving it to you a little bit. So you could weather your storms there, and like I said, your storms were few and far between. And in a week where tight ends were few and far between, I just made a big point about 5 points, and now here you're facing me by 2 double digits. Trust me, we're going to keep looking. That is the anomaly. Now, Jeffy, we're off to such a great start that this didn't cost you too much. You still stay in second spot. Rennie, you're the top of the 2-2s because you're high scoring. So this might prove to be a pretty epic matchup as the weeks go on. Speaking of the 2-2s, we knew going into this week that there was a lot of similar matchups and records that were quite close or could get even closer. This is a perfect example. So Marco wins to go to 2-2. Tim loses to go in 2-2. But at the same time, They're tied nonetheless, but Marco, you got the edge right now. You were really led by your running backs. You've got running back 2 in Walker and 4 in Mason. And then everyone else just kind of did enough to get by, and now I'm already starting to look stupid for my tight end comment. I swear to you, the low tight end scores are coming because these were about it. Hill did crack our top 5. Then he actually left the game, so he's just a high risk, high reward play there. Evans didn't crack the top 5, but he's off to a pretty good start. But that wasn't enough, Tim, to narrow the gap. This one wasn't super close, mainly due to Marco's kind of standout running back performances. And if we look at the bench, you guys made most of the right calls, so not much to go here. Although, Timmer, looks like you've got 2 of this week's top 5s because Kittle was actually the tight end 4. So in a league where we don't have a lot of tight end depth, you might be the king of the hill on this one. So, like I said, both tied 2 and 2, both very much in the mix. In a matchup where 2 people would have been just as comfortable watching football on the Saturday night, we did have a pretty epic swing here. Another 2 and 2 and a 2 and 2. Matty, unfortunately, in your case, you had the low score in the week, so you didn't really show up for this fight, whereas Maxon overpunched his prediction here and actually putting up 140 pretty solid. How'd you do so? You're another one where it wasn't really one person who did it. I mean, you had an underperformance in Singletary, and you certainly had some 20-point performances, but not really too many that actually cracked our top 5. And even you got your negative here in Buffalo. You just had that consistent 20-20-20-20, which just is going to break most people's backs. And taking a look, you made mostly the right calls. You could have put a few guys in here, but obviously you didn't need to so much. Matt, in your case, unfortunately for you, buddy, I mean, you had Steele here, who obviously maybe should not have missed his sister's wedding after all, and a few underperformances. You definitely had your wide receiver crew, I'd say, as your strength, and you had a great Monday night in having both St. Brown and Gibbs, but you needed a monster of a Monday night to do anything crazy. Now, you do have Darnold, the fierce kind of competitor here on the bench, and actually he would have been a smarter start, but when you're looking at a point differential at over 30, very rarely you're going to get it on your bench, so you just have to bounce back. You're still 2 and 2. Technically, both of you guys are still in the playoffs as of now, so well done. Tiebreakers are going to matter, and let's move on to week 5 for both of you. What's worse than staying up late on a school night to finish a video? Doing that for a league where you're playing the first place guy, and now you've dropped to the 10th place guy. Son of a nutcracker. My tight end is non-existent, as I've already kind of alluded to. Now, on the plus side, I have quarterback depth, folks, because I had a bunch that went off. I had 3 in the top 8, so trade me. Well, don't. I actually like all 3 of them, but, you know, my team's pretty crappy. I might need a facelift. I was the 2nd, 5th, and 8th at the quarterback position. Unfortunately, we're not a 3-quarterback league, so one of them had to be on the bench, and everyone else sucked butt, except for maybe my running back. In terms of our number 1, still undefeated, was not able to take him off. So even though you underperformed, as Yahoo may have predicted, another one that seems to be a common kind of thread here, you had both of the Robinsons. One did great, one didn't. You just had a lot of kind of that dog pile 15 to 20 point performance across the board. You didn't need much else against me. I didn't put up too much of a fight, so you could have put in almost any combination of your team and probably beaten me, which is pretty embarrassing. You did also have a quarterback on the bench that was one of the few in the top 5 that I did not have. Baker has been off to a great start this year and was our quarterback 4. So I wasn't able to take him down. As a consequence, I fall to the bottom of this league, so I better snap out of it or I'm going to lose it. Gene, your winning streak continues. How long will it go? Who knows? So not 10th, but tied for 8th? Is that all right? Not really, because my points scored is not phenomenal. Although I have outscored a few of you. Doesn't matter. Wins is what counts, and you see our big block here of 2 and 2. Dibbler at 3 and 1, and we got our undefeated Gene. Is that all going to stay as it is? My matchup's just awesome. I went from playing the number 1 to the number 2. And we do have Connor as well on the outside of the playoffs, playing someone on the inside. Same here, although this case they're tied with Maxon and Tim. We've got, can Rennie take down his potential prom mistake from years ago, or is Kent's run of win streak going to exceed 1 and go to 2? And then, Woody, it's on you here, buddy. Can you be the person to stop Gene's undefeated run that extends all the way back into last season? Let's see, buddy, but best of luck on it. Looking ahead to week 5, I actually want one correction. I just don't want to go back and record the whole thing, but I did forget to mention in the Marco versus Tim matchup, we had a bit of a Monday night war. Tim was up 23 and had some players kicking, but Marco's players were just a little bit better, led mainly by Walker, Gino, Laporta, had a kind of good run. And so that win becomes a little bit more impressive when you know that that was very much a come-from-behind victory. Wanted to pay homage to that, so well done there. Coming into week 5, you probably already know this. If you don't, you're not paying attention. The bye weeks, they're not just a come-in, they are actually here. So for a lot of people, if you're a Lion, Eagle, Charger, or Titan fan, or owner, I should say, you probably already know about it. That's why the scores were a little bit messed up when we took a look at next week's matchups, or this week's matchups. Next week as well, in week 6, we've also got some interesting things to take a look at. So I would expect a lot of waiver wire movement, maybe even a trade. I hate to dare I say it. So it should be exciting. I'm pumped already. And this should be sliding in just into the Thursday. But I'll be honest, I'm a little more excited for Sunday. That's just me personally. So for all of you, for week 5, best of luck, crew.